once again, thank you very much for the opportunity, colleagues. As Mr. Mtota has said, my name is Sibani Ntuli. I am currently a candidate quantity surveyor with the Department of Public Works. I'm based in the Durban Regional Office. Okay, my first question would be, the CIDB practice note says that in the construction industry, when we are evaluating potential bidders for construction projects, we have to pick the lowest bidder. Over the years, this has resulted in extreme underpricing by contractors, which has then resulted in poor quality of work. Sometimes contractors will not finish the work. And this presents also a challenge to the people that are evaluating these bids, because even though they can see based on their own experience that probably this company or this contractor will not be able to finish the job or will compromise the quality of the work, but because of the CIDB practice notes, we are bound to adhere to these regulations. So how do you, as senior professionals, see a way to deal with this, to essentially deal with extreme underpricing, to deal with the situation that results in poor quality of work, work being abandoned, re-tendering, and all these things that eventually delay public sector projects from seeing their finality as was projected initially?
Okay, thanks. Bonke, I think we're going to give you the first bite to that question. I hope you understood it.
Yeah, I had the question. It's a very good question and a very tough question. And I think I will not try and answer the question on CIDB's behalf, because I think, as you rightly pointed out, Sibani, part of this CIDB standard for uniformity of construction, and as a regulator, they do what they are doing. And but I would defend the CIDB. I don't think the CIDB promotes the practice that is happening in client departments in the public sector when it comes to procurement of construction works. And what you alluded to, I don't think for me is a question of is limited to contractors. It's the same with the procurement of professional services. My reading of it, it's a view. I mean, we can have a whole day's conference on this, but I think part of the reason we need to be looking at the supply chain departments in South Africa when it comes to procurement of construction works and related services. In that, I feel, and I don't have evidence of this, but anecdotally, there are three processes that lead to construction works. There's internal processes, and then something becomes, it goes to bid specification, then it goes out bid specification committee, then it goes out to tender, then it comes back, then it becomes a bid evaluation process, BEC. Then from BEC it goes to BAC, bid adjudication committee. Now, yes, supply chain is embedded in our legislation in terms of the MFMA at local government and the PFMA at provincial and local government. And the definition of procurement in terms of section 207, whatever it is of the constitution, I'm not too sure, is procurement must satisfy 5 criteria, cost effective, value for money, equitable, competitive, and all those things. Five key principles. And I'm not sure to what extent those 5 principles embedded in the constitution in terms of procurement filtered down to decision makers around who is most able to perform that particular service and deliver a project in this context. And I think there's a value chain to it, because if you are working with consultants who design the works, if it's designed by employer, procurement is followed, and their fees are heavily discounted, I don't think you're going to get a good product at the end of the day. I don't think by the time it comes to the contractor to price, it's already a problem. The seeds of disaster and failure in terms of poor project performance, in terms of cost overrun, time overruns, disputes, arbitration, litigation have already been planted. So I think for me, the entirety of the value chain in the ecosystem is sick. Is something is not right there, and I don't think the practice note of the CIDB says you must appoint the lowest tenderer. What it says in terms of the triple PFA is whether it's 80-20 depending on the value threshold, or it's 90-10 depending on the value threshold, and what it is in the functionality criteria. I would love to be a fly on the wall in those meetings that deliberate on the functionality criteria in terms of risk analysis, risk mitigation, track record, level of commitment, without being accused or sacrificing the so-called developmental goals in terms of transformation and mainstreaming of certain class of contractors for certain class of works, whether that categorization is by gender, race, age, whatever the transformation criteria that is. And so I think the problem is in the way the system is designed that leads to those problems, where you have a situation where the person who takes the greatest risk in the project, the contractor, comes in right at the end after stage 4. I'm sure you know the design development, the project lifecycle stages in terms of in the South African context. My view is that the person who creates the greatest risk in terms of delivery of the service infrastructure is the contractor. And why can't he come in earlier? Why you can't design a system where we have an early contractor involvement, even if it's still designed by an employer? Because you could go for other solutions where design and construct, or design and build, or others. Design and employ is not the only way to procure infrastructure projects. I know it's a long answer, and I try to explain what I believe are some of the root causes and interpretation. But also, I am curious as to what is the level of skill, technical skill, that sits in these supply chain management processes. Because my suspicion is that technical people, like the guests in this webinar, are few and far in between in those meetings. And maybe even when they're present, I doubt they're listened to. I feel supply chain management has been given too much power in terms of legislation, or in terms of how the legislation is being applied. Maybe there are, in my view, unintended consequences, but it's not the only problem. Of course, there are people who are chance takers who shouldn't be doing what they're doing, but that's why the CIDB is there to regulate and say, this class and category of works, it belongs to that band of contractors, CE8, if it's civil engineering, GB, whatever the case is. So, but I still think one of the root causes is that I'm deeply suspicious that, maybe suspicious is the wrong way, like curious as to who sits in these committees and makes those most decisions. How much technical input is there around all these other factors in terms of functionality? Sorry for the long answer, colleagues. I didn't mean to take up so much time, but I'm very passionate about this, and I feel very strongly about it.
I feel you. I feel you.
That's my answer. I'm sure there's more to it, and with time, I think in future, when I follow up, we could explore that a little bit further.
No, Bonke, thanks, and that's why we're doing this. You know, I mean, this starts in one answer, and then it will lead us to other things as well. That's the whole idea with this conversation. So, Risimati, we've got 10 minutes left on this time. If you can do it in 10 minutes, can I give you a go? Under 10 minutes.
I can just take 2 minutes to maybe a couple of moments just to add on what Bonke just mentioned now. I think one of the things that we normally face, is there's just so much power, for your supply chain specialists, and I think as engineers we have very little influence. Our technical know-how is hardly taken into consideration. Part of it is, I think there is this thing that is out there that, you know, like engineers or the technocrats of the industry have so much access to information that they are able to give information out to the bidders out there. But what CIDB is doing, they're just actually regulating the actual compliance on how the process is running. But in specifically like in local government, like where I'm located, one of the challenges is that when the model that has now been actually developed, this comes from your national level, where you want to try and bridge the economic gap, like the social participation in the economy. And you understand construction is one of the biggest industry where you can actually be a contractor without being an engineer. You can start a business of construction by even having a spaza shop, you know. So it's a very open system. So that level of open system where everyone can participate is also creating a problem, because the grading system on who should participate and how, it becomes more of a compliance type of a thing. You can just get a junior engineer or QS to try and price for you. Chances are you might get a job, but you might not even have the skill to actually do the job. So these are some of the things that actually contribute to the challenges we are facing, far beyond even before we get to a point where you have designed a project or you have done probably your stakeholder integration, project management, whichever level you might have gotten involved. Prior to you getting to that, there's a lot that is happening in our socio-economic space, which actually influences how us as a public sector operates to try and accommodate this gap in the system. So that is basically one of the challenges. And if you go back and you look at the hierarchy from treasury level, they are forced to transform and change some of these policies to try and accommodate the emerging and upcoming contracts or service providers or in the industry. And us as the project managers and implementers, we are now bound to bend backwards to try and accommodate that, you know, whether it's a 90-10 as Bonke mentioned or 70-30, chances are you are bound to comply. And non-compliance means you're not going to get a job. And the competitive space out there propels that you have to somehow adjust. And people take advantage of the system. They can underprice, they can hit you on VOs when the project is running, because they know once they're in, you can actually terminate. And that's where you end up having scope creep, readjustment, under designs, and all those things. But all this actually influenced by our current socio-economic status, where we're trying to bridge the gap between those who can and those who cannot. And the industry is so open for everyone to enter. There are no, it's a free entry market. I mean, you can have the spaza shop, you can still own a construction company. And that's why we see all these things happening out there. But the skill, doesn't mean that the skill is not there, but I think it cannot be applied fully because of the current legislative frameworks we're operating under. That's what I can add.
Can I just add my 2 cents in terms of that first question?
Okay, so you'll make it in 4 minutes. We've only got 4 minutes.
I'll try my best.
Okay.
I think Bonke said it beautiful, very smart. I think, you see, ITP, it's okay in terms of the regulation. We need sort of a regulatory framework. I think the biggest challenge that I've observed, talking from the public space, SOE, is the supply chain has been taken away from the norm in terms of the normal project management processes. There's no longer synergy between technical and supply chain. You've got a supply chain that is there, that is run by, I'm sorry with the wording that I'm going to use, by administrators that doesn't have the technical know-how. So automatically you're creating a problem, because there's nothing wrong to try to transform economy. I fully support the transformation economy. However, when you do that, if you look in the past, you used to have your extended public works program where you used to come up in terms of the ranks. Now, if you look today, it's a level 9 CITP that is required. You get a company that doesn't have the expertise. And furthermore, the due diligence has not been done, because if you're going to spend 100 million, you ought to do due diligence. It's basics. Because even if I'm going to invest in Zimbabwe, or Americans are investing in South Africa, in terms of private-public partnership, they perform due diligence to check what kind of infrastructure do you have, what kind of skills do you have. So these are some of the challenges in terms of that. And for me, there are guys that I saw when I was growing up in Middelburg, in terms of extended public works, growing up nicely in the program. But you can't jump from being level 2 to level 8. It's a recipe for disaster. Who performs this due diligence? It's a person who's an administrator. And again, another point, we're only left with 2 minutes. The issues of SIBs, the issues of people that are in procurement that are supposed to be registered and technical to balance that. I think some years back, they used to have a mechanical engineer who was a CE who used to enforce that. But the problem, I think we saw later on where, to what Risimati said, Simelane, where we're being kicked out in terms of these things. They don't want us to be involved in terms of this. From the contracting strategy, it's supposed to be there. Because when you pay for the contracting strategy, it's clear. If it's going to be level 1 and 4, obviously you're trying to develop people. But when you talk to level 5 up to above, there must be somebody who's a technician, there must be a technologist and an engineer, so that in terms of the public safety, because the aim of being a professional is to make sure the public is safe. That's a key function. Whatever design, the public at all times must be safe. So those things are no longer being looked. You remember some years there was a bridge that collapsed in Limpopo, and you ask the same thing. Who in his right mind will take that risk, knowing very well, because we're here to protect the public. It's raining time right now. The key function that's supposed to work, what is it? You want a road with a storm water. You can't just put a road without a storm water. You're building dams that are going to kill people. I'm going to let it go. It's a minute. Let me hand it over to you, Tim.